Good day, everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Alex Malouf. I work at a company many of you will know, Procter Gamble, and I'm delighted to be joining you here today to talk as part of the conference about leadership and internal communications and how they're a partnership to drive the business and organizations forward. I'm going to be talking about something slightly different. I'm going to be looking at the inside from the outside. And my focus is going to be about how we can use external channels to drive employee engagement. So I only want to try and do three things with you. First is inspire you to think differently. Look at how we can create new concepts or new processes which will work with your audience. And then look at the idea of amplification. So how can you take your internal messaging and amplify it externally to drive employee engagement? And all of these things are more than possible today. Before we begin, I want to pose two questions to all of you. Bear these in mind as you watch this session. So first of all, what are you going to do differently after today? Second, how are you going to address your internal comms through external channels? Now, with that, I want to start with some basic truths. Many of us live in a world which is essentially mobile first. You walk around your coffee shops, your malls, high streets, and now increasing your offices, and you will see people on their mobiles using it both for work and for play. They'll be looking at emails, but also as well they'll be scrolling through their social media. They'll be browsing online. Mobile is defining how we communicate today. It's true for pretty much every age group out there, but especially true for younger age groups, millennials and below. Now, this is borne out by research. This is one simple research which I wanted to share, done last year by the Reuters Institute. If you look at the main source of news by age group, you will see that pretty much every age group under the age of 44 uses online as its primary source of news. Compare it to other sources of news, and online dominates. Now, for me, I see this as an opportunity for internal communicators, and I'll explain how now. So, let's first of all define what content is. Now, what works for your audiences? And unsurprisingly, this is how we define it where I am. Content works pretty much for everybody because we're all looking for the same thing. We're looking for informative, entertaining communications that move us in a certain direction. This is how we see it from a consumer's perspective, but it's the same in terms of employees. What are we doing in terms of producing content which resonates with them? And it's probably not a surprise, but good content is worth its weight in gold. Having content which works with your employees will also as well work with external stakeholders and vice versa. Now, the walls are coming down in terms of content sharing. They're coming down in terms of understanding how content works with different audiences. So this really for us is the opportunity. How can we look, firstly, at developing content which has a shared purpose? Internal content can and will be very powerful for external audiences. And likewise, content shared externally will also influence your employees. How can we use this content to essentially drive engagement directly if you're aiming either internally or externally, and also as well indirectly? You look at the boomerang effect. If you share material externally and your employees read about it. Third element which we've got to look at is how do we maximize the impact of the content that we're sharing? And if we go back to what I was discussing initially about the mobile world that we live in today, how can we use different channels to share the content that we're producing? So essentially, share and then reapply. So really, we have a choice in front of us. We're producing great content. We want to ensure that it has an impact on our audience. And how do we get the message out to that audience? Either indirectly or, as is often the case today, directly. My final truth is, as I mentioned before briefly, great content attracts. It attracts a wide audience, it is reshared, and you'll often find employees, families, and their friends talking about your company with the people they know through media which they see externally. So, as I was saying, it really is a boomerang effect. How can you push those messages which matter to you internally through external audiences, but also as well external channels? So let's look at the content creation cycle. For us, there really are four elements. One is the inspiration piece. So what are we looking at which we think will be fascinating to our audiences? Then there's a creation element. How do we shape these insights, these data points into stories which draw people in? The third element is the amplification. There's no point having a great story if nobody's going to see it. What we want to do is try and get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And the final element is measurement. How does our content do? How is amplification working? And what lessons can we learn from what we're sharing, which will improve not only how we create content and the basis for creating that content, but also as well how we're sharing it. So how people are seeing and responding to the content. So for me, this is essentially a newsroom concept for communicators in organizations. And that's what I'd love us to see happening in different organizations that we work in. What we need to start doing is thinking more like journalists, not just externally, but also internally. How can we become editors in chief for organizations? How can we filter through or find, first of all, the best stories? How can we then shape them into content which people would not only be interested in reading or watching or listening to, but also then sharing? And then how are we measuring the success of the content that we are creating, just like any newsroom would do. A couple of ideas for you based on those concepts which I've shared. First of all of us are using social media. I know very few people who are not using social media today in any organization. Now, they're using it personally, but some of the best organizations out there are actually using social media as a tool to reach their employees. Now, there are many different ways of doing this. Some examples could be using closed accounts on platforms, pretty much all the platforms today. It could be Instagram, it could be Facebook, it could be LinkedIn. How are you using those to reach your employees? It's very easy to understand how much time employees are using their mobiles for. Apple and others share essentially applications and means to measure FaceTime. And one simple way of reaching out to these audiences, which are on mobile, is to look at closed social media accounts. The second element of this, which essentially is a continuation, is using content hubs on mobile to help employees, first of all, consume data, and then secondly, share that content with a wider audience, with their families and friends. Some of the best organizations out there I've seen have created apps and tools whereby content is not only disseminated, but it's also designed for employees to share in their own social media networks. So you are not only hitting one part of your audience, but you're also engaging with a wider audience, a wider group of stakeholders and developing trust between them, but also as well, you're increasing pride in your own organization through employees sharing what they believe is the best thing about the places that they work in. So I'm going to end on this note. There is so much that we can do through using external tools, using external processes to improve our internal communications. Look at how external communicators engage their audiences. First of all, they understand extremely well their audience and what the habits of their audience are and how those habits are shaped, especially when it comes to media consumption. Second, you're creating all of this incredible content. Look at adapting it, looking at resharing it. Look at creating that boomerang effect whereby your employees, families, and friends, customers, suppliers, whoever it may be, are actually talking about the points that you are raising internally. So they're reinforcing your messages. The third element, use external media to amplify your reach. Don't be scared of using social media, in particular through private closed groups, through apps, to address your employees when they are on their mobiles, they're using their social media. The great thing about doing this is it doesn't need to be intrusive. They can decide to sign up, they can decide to log off. It's up to them. But they, for me, are really the points which I want to emphasize. There's a great deal that we can do here. And I think by working together, both internal and external communicators, we have an opportunity to get more done with the content that we have and impact even more stakeholders, particularly employees, to not only raise awareness of what the organization is doing, but also in drive engagement and pride in the company. I'm going to stop here and I'll be more than happy to take questions from any of you through the organizers. Thank you.